It happened overnight, a storm that meteorologists were watching cautiously, tracking, measuring, running models on, did something in the span of a few hours that stopped forecasters in their tracks. It exploded. Wind speeds that were already dangerous jumped by over 50 miles per hour in less than a day. The pressure at its center dropped like a stone. Satellite imagery that looked concerning at midnight looked apocalyptic by morning. This typhoon just became a monster, and it is heading directly toward American territory. Right now, emergency sirens are going off on US soil. Shelters are filling up. Families are making decisions about whether to stay or go. Except on an island, there is nowhere to go. You ride it out or you don't. There is no third option. What you are about to hear is not speculation. It is not a worst-case scenario drawn up to frighten people. This is what is happening right now, in real time, to American citizens living in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the next 24 hours will determine how many of them make it through with their lives, their homes, and everything they've built still intact. Let's start with what happened, because the speed of this storm's transformation is the first thing you need to understand. 3 days ago, this system was being watched as a tropical storm, significant, worth monitoring, but not unusual for the Western Pacific Basin. Forecasters were tracking it, running models, issuing standard advisories. Communities in the region were paying attention, but not yet in emergency mode. Then something shifted in the atmosphere around it. The upper-level winds that normally disrupt and weaken developing storms, a phenomenon called wind shear, relaxed. The ocean surface beneath the system, already warm, fed the storm with an almost uninterrupted supply of energy, and the storm responded. In meteorology, there is a specific term for what happened next. Rapid intensification. The official definition is a sustained wind speed increase of at least 35 miles per hour within a 24-hour period. This storm didn't just meet that threshold, it shattered it. Wind speeds climbed by more than 50 miles per hour in under 20 hours. The central pressure, which is the measurement meteorologists use to gauge a storm's raw power, with lower meaning stronger, plummeted faster than most storms experience across their entire lifespan. By the time the sun came up, and the latest reconnaissance aircraft data came in, what had been a tropical storm was now a super typhoon. The jump wasn't gradual, it was a detonation. Rapid intensification is one of the most dangerous phenomena in tropical meteorology, not because of what the storm does to the atmosphere, but because of what it does to the people in its path. Communities that had 72 hours to prepare suddenly have 36. Evacuation plans that assumed a strong typhoon are now being recalculated for a monster. And on small islands in the middle of the ocean, recalculating your plan with less time is not just inconvenient, it can be fatal. Now let's talk about what this storm actually is at its peak, because the numbers matter. A Category 5 tropical cyclone, the highest category that exists on the Saffir-Simpson scale, requires sustained winds of 157 miles per hour or greater. That is the floor, the bottom of the category. This storm's sustained winds are currently measured at over 180 miles per hour. That puts it not just in Category 5 territory, but in the upper tier of the most powerful storms ever recorded, anywhere on Earth. For context, winds at 74 miles per hour are enough to be classified as a hurricane or typhoon. At 100 miles per hour, roof damage to well-constructed homes becomes common. At 130 miles per hour, the roof is likely gone entirely. At 157 and above, the National Hurricane Center's own language shifts from describing damage to structures to describing the destruction of them. Neighborhoods. Entire neighborhoods leveled. That is what the scale says at this level. At 180 miles per hour sustained, you are in territory where almost nothing above ground survives intact without purpose-built reinforced concrete construction. And even that gets tested in ways its builders never fully anticipated. The storm has also developed a clearly defined eye, the eerily calm center of a tropical cyclone surrounded by the eye wall, which is the most violent ring of convection in the entire system. A well-defined eye on satellite imagery is one of the signatures of a mature, powerful, well-organized storm. It means the system is not fighting itself. It is running efficiently at full power, sustained. This is the storm that is now on high alert track toward US territory. Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, Rota, are American territory, have been since 1898 and 1978 respectively. The people who live there are American citizens, not residents, not visa holders, citizens. They are entitled to every federal protection and resource that any American in any of the 50 states is entitled to. And right now, those citizens are being told to prepare for a direct strike from one of the most powerful storms on Earth. The combined population of these islands exceeds 200,000 people. That number includes families who have lived on these islands for generations. It includes US military personnel and their families stationed at Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, Naval Base Guam, and other installations that represent some of the most critical American military infrastructure in the entire Indo-Pacific region. It includes tourists who did not plan their trip around typhoon season and are now stranded. It includes elderly residents who cannot easily be moved, people with medical needs who depend on equipment that requires electricity, and children whose entire understanding of the world is the island they were born on. All of them are now waiting for this storm. Emergency declarations have been signed. The governor of Guam has activated the island's emergency operations center. Schools have been closed. Non-essential government operations have been suspended. Residents have been ordered to secure their properties, fill their bathtubs and every available container with fresh water, because water treatment systems go down when power goes down. Get to a designated shelter or the most structurally sound location available to them. The instruction from emergency managers has been consistent. Do not shelter in a mobile home or a lightweight structure. Do not assume your house can handle this because it handled the last one. This storm is different in degree in a way that matters. What survived a Category 3 does not automatically survive a Category 5 at the upper end of its range. Let's talk about the specific threats this storm carries, because the wind, as terrifying as it is only part of the picture. Storm surge is the reason major tropical cyclones are so consistently deadly, and it is the threat that people most consistently underestimate right up until it is too late. Here is what happens physically. As an intense tropical cyclone approaches a coastline, the extremely low atmospheric pressure at its center and the powerful rotating winds create a dome of elevated seawater beneath the storm. The ocean literally rises under it, sometimes by several feet before the storm even makes landfall. Then, as the storm pushes toward shore, that elevated dome of water gets driven onto the coast. It doesn't arrive as a series of waves. It arrives as a sustained flood, a wall of seawater that rises steadily, inexorably, and holds for hours. In a storm of this intensity, storm surge heights along the most exposed coastlines can reach 20 to 25 feet above normal sea level. On an island, that is not just a coastal problem. A 20-foot surge does not stop at the beach. It travels inland until terrain forces it to stop. And on low-lying coastal areas, which on Guam and Saipan are exactly where the most people live, the terrain doesn't force it to stop quickly. People who have survived major storm surges describe it not as water rushing in, but as a room filling up. Steady, relentless, and quiet in a way that is somehow more frightening than the roaring wind outside. Then there is the rainfall. A mature, slow-moving super typhoon doesn't just bring heavy rain, it brings rainfall totals that are difficult to comprehend. 20 inches in 24 hours is not an extreme outlier for a system like this. It is within the normal range of what storms of this intensity produce. Some of the most powerful Western Pacific typhoons in recorded history have dropped more than 40 inches on a single location. When that volume of water falls on an island in a concentrated period, the flooding is not limited to low-lying areas. It moves uphill, it triggers landslides, it saturates the soil until the ground itself becomes unstable. It overwhelms drainage systems that were never designed for anything close to this volume. And here is the critical point. The storm surge is coming from the ocean, while the flooding from rainfall is coming from the sky, both at the same time. Communities that are elevated enough to avoid the surge may still face catastrophic inland flooding. Communities that are on the coast face both simultaneously. The storm's forward speed compounds every one of these threats. This system has been moving at approximately 10 miles per hour, slow for a typhoon. Slow is dangerous for a reason that is intuitive once you think about it. A fast storm is brutal but brief. It arrives, inflicts its damage, and exits, its winds, its surge, its rainfall, are all limited by the time it spends over any given location. A slow storm is different. It sits, it grinds, it gives the wind hours more time to work on every structure still standing. It gives the rainfall more time to accumulate until flooding becomes unmanageable. It gives the surge more time to push further inland. Each additional hour the eye wall spends over an island is an hour of conditions that no building, no infrastructure, no person was designed to endure. When this storm makes landfall, power will go out immediately. That is not an assumption. It is a certainty that emergency managers, utility companies, and federal agencies are all planning around. The only question is how long restoration will take, and the answer, based on historical precedent from storms of this magnitude in US Pacific territories, is not days, it is weeks or months. After Super Typhoon Yutu struck Saipan in 2018 as a Category 5, parts of the island went without grid power for close to a year. The physical isolation of these islands, the limited local resources for large-scale infrastructure repair, and the sheer scale of damage a storm like this inflicts on power systems means that residents who survive the storm then face weeks or months of recovery without electricity, without air conditioning in tropical heat, without reliable refrigeration, without the basic infrastructure that most Americans consider so automatic they never think about it. Medical infrastructure is particularly vulnerable. Hospitals in Guam and Saipan are well equipped by regional standards but are not unlimited in their capacity. Backup generators have finite fuel supplies. Medical equipment for critically ill patients depends on uninterrupted power. Dialysis patients, patients on ventilators, patients with conditions that require consistent temperature or medication storage, each one of those individuals represents an acute crisis if power infrastructure is disrupted for an extended period. The military presence on Guam adds a layer to this story that is worth understanding clearly. Andersen Air Force Base and Naval Base Guam are not small installations. They are among the most strategically significant American military positions in the Pacific, critical infrastructure for U.S. operations across the entire Indo-Pacific region. The military has been preparing these installations for the storm's arrival. Aircraft have been flown out or moved into protective hangars. Vessels have been moved to sea to ride out the storm rather than risk damage at their moorings. Personnel who are not essential to storm response have been sheltered. The military has its own robust emergency protocols, its own power generation, its own supply chains. It will survive this storm. But the presence of those installations on an island that is simultaneously a civilian community means that the military's resources and capabilities will also be part of the civilian recovery effort in the hours and days after landfall. Federal response was activated before the storm arrived. FEMA has pre-positioned supplies, water, food, medical equipment, generators in the region in advance of landfall, which is the standard operating procedure when forecast confidence is high enough, far enough in advance. Urban search and rescue teams have been placed on standby. Coast Guard assets are positioned for post-storm response. The federal emergency declaration signed by the governor and backed by federal authorization ensures that the full weight of federal disaster response machinery is aligned and funded before the first eye-wall wind arrives. But here is the gap that matters, and that no federal prepositioning entirely closes. From the moment this storm makes landfall, to the moment outside help arrives in the quantities needed to make a meaningful difference, that window is the most dangerous period for the people on these islands. Conditions during and immediately after landfall prevent aircraft from landing and ships from docking. The storm has to pass, damage has to be assessed, routes have to be confirmed passable. Only then does the full force of outside response begin moving in earnest. For the 24 to 72 hours in that gap, the people on these islands are relying on what they have, what their neighbors have, and what local emergency services can provide with the resources already on the island. That gap is why every hour of preparation before landfall matters. That gap is why emergency managers have been broadcasting the same message for days: shelter, supplies, water, medication, documents. Get to a sturdy structure, do not wait, because once the storm is there, the choices narrow to one. This typhoon became a monster in hours. It will make landfall in hours more. 200,000 Americans are right now inside whatever shelter they could reach, listening to the wind build outside, waiting for what comes next. Some of them have been through this before. Some of them are going through it for the first time. All of them are American citizens on American soil, facing something that most people on the mainland will never have to face. What happens in the next 24 hours on those islands, the survival, the damage, the beginning of what will be a long recovery, deserves every bit of attention this country can give it. We will bring you the full picture as soon as the storm clears and reporters can get in. Until then, stay with us.